Yasmin Smith, who is an image consultant and an advocate for civility. Coming up on CaribNation.
When America wants to know what's happening in the Caribbean diaspora, there is one clear choice.
Hello, welcome to CaribNation.
Both people inside and outside are
very excited about today's program.
Looking at you, I can tell that you have traveled the journey.
One television organization brings America close to the people, stories, and events that affects Caribbean life. Get close, get answers, get CaribNation.
Pleasure to talk to you today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.
Now, as I said, we have seen so many incidences recently of young people especially who are acting uncivilly among each other. Let's talk a little bit about what are some of the sources of this lack of civility.
Well, you're certainly right. There's been a lot in the news recently about uncivil behavior among our young people, and in particular girls. Mm-hmm. I would say that some of the sources are the general decline in moral values in our society, as well as our young people being so distracted from family life, from school, because there are so many extracurricular activities and so many opportunities for them to be focused on everything else besides school, family, and community. So we think that some of the underlying causes for incivility have to do with the obsession, with telecommunication and gaming, and just, again, the general decline in moral values in our society.
When we look back, coming from the Caribbean, you're from Jamaica, I'm from Barbados, and with a little bit of Guyana, the whole Caribbean has a reputation or a culture for having been trained to be a little more civil, to be polite to people. We grew up saying good morning and good afternoon to people on the street. And the first words we learn are please and thank you. Those values seem to have been diluted over time. And we have heard all different types of reasons for them. One of them is that when we move into a new culture, we forget our old culture, we adapt to the new culture. But aren't we supposed to bring the best of what we grew up with us when we move to the next culture?
Yes, and I would agree with you that there definitely is a falling off of mannerisms and practices that we grew up with, that we were accustomed to in our Caribbean culture. Manners was taught at home. Mm-hmm. We had respect for our elders, respect for neighbors in the community, and as children we always lived up to those expectations. We would never think of passing an adult without saying good morning or good evening. Right. Whereas here in the US and in other places in the West, it's quite common for a child to walk right past you and not greet you in any way. And so I think you're quite correct that there is a falling off of what would typically be expected behavior in the Caribbean culture. And it is a matter of assimilating wanting to fit in, wanting to be like the others, not wanting, to stand out. So whereas you and I might walk into an office and say good morning, and others might look and
get no response.
Get no response and think that it's strange. Perhaps the second generation then thinks, well, I don't want to, be different. I don't want to stand out by, demonstrating these kinds of behaviors.
Now, you've co-authored a book about civility. What are some of the principles that you've put in place in that book and how we deal with this?
Well, thank you for asking about that, Darius. The book is called The Power of Civility, and I am the co-author. And we do define civility in the book as the practice of 3 founding principles. The principles are respect, restraint, that is self-restraint, and personal responsibility. And that definition really emanates from Dr. P.M. Forney, who is the co-founder of the Civility Project at Johns Hopkins University. And the principles are guiding principles, for civility, which is all about a code of conduct and how we treat others. And so we take those principles and then we apply them to everyday practices, which Dr. Forney refers to as the rules of considerate conduct in how we interact and exchange with others. And so some of those rules or everyday practices would be simple things like saying good morning, holding the door, saying hello, respecting other people's time, respecting their space, acknowledging others. These are easily done everyday things that anyone can do and which costs nothing.
And we just need to reinforce those, I suppose.
Indeed, and we need to really put them as a priority in the way we teach our children at home and the way we educate our children in school, because there's, as you know, almost a total absence of any kind of instruction on etiquette or manners, in school.
In school, yeah. That was one of the issues I was going to raise. That is, I have several friends who are teachers, and their frustration is that they have to deal with these young people who have no framework within which to understand, even if they try to impart to them some of these basic principles. They don't have a framework within which to put it, which means, or it tells me that families are not doing their part. Where do we start?
Well, I think we have to start with family. I think teaching civility should begin at home. It really should, and then it should be embodied in school and community as well, but it really should begin in the home. But what we do find in the home is that there is an absence of a focus on parental responsibility. So parents are so busy working multiple jobs. They come home, they're stressed out, the television is on, so the children are directed to the television. So there's very little opportunity, to enforce those valuable, practices, instill those values and give a child an opportunity to demonstrate them. So we need to really come back to a place where we can minimize those distractions, make the effort, if it's even 20 minutes an evening to sit down and, talk about experiences during the day, how did that apply to, what are the values of, respect and responsibility, and have children really focus on what it means, and not to learn it by rote, but to really understand.
To live it.
To live it, the sincerity of it, absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things that I instituted in my home was everyone had to be home for Sunday dinner. And amazingly, that carried on through college, because even those, when they left for college one by one, they'd call back at dinner time, and we put the phone on speaker, and we still had our conversation.
Wonderful. What a wonderful practice
and
that is.
That has really served us well in terms of keeping in touch, keeping the family values and that sort of thing. So I suppose these are some of the small things that parents can institute.
Yes, indeed. And I'm so happy that you mentioned that example, which is so core to us as Caribbeans, because we all can relate to that experience of being at the dinner table. And indeed, there is a famous quote by Judith Martin, better known as Miss Manners, and I have that quote on the front of a table placemat that I have created as a teaching tool. And she talks about the value of being at the dinner table as a place for teaching not just how to use the knife and fork, but for conversation, tolerance, sharing,
Right.
the simple act of knowing how to pass, you know, being respectful and considerate, arriving at the table on time, being properly dressed. So it's a great place. It's the center of learning in the
Yes,
family.
yes.
And we certainly have gotten away from that again with the television, with
And the computer.
with the computer and other gaming. So children are not at the dinner table when they should be, but I'm so happy that you mentioned that example.
And I've seen also they come to the table and they come with their little, they come with
Indeed.
the iPhone or
Indeed.
whatever it is.
And we
with
see it
them,
not
yeah.
only at the table, but even in restaurants. How many
Restaurants,
times have you
yes.
been walking through a restaurant and there are two people sitting down for dinner and both of them are on their cell phone? So you wonder, why did they come to have dinner?
Have dinner in the first
Right.
place. That takes me to communication. We have not trained young children beyond playmates at 3 and 4, where they automatically play with each other. But I think by the time they get to elementary school level, we haven't taught them how to communicate effectively with each other, especially the opposite sexes. We separate them at a certain point. And I wonder if that lack of skill and frustration is then translated later, by the time they get to teenagers, into anger. And we see abuse of women, we see anger among girls and frustration. And then when we get to adulthood, it's sheer abuse and total mayhem. And I wonder if we need to go back and look at how we socialize children and acculturate them from the very beginning and change that whole system.
This is a very good point you've raised, Darius. Thank you for bringing that up. In fact, there is no relationship without communication, or the quality of our relationships depend a lot on the quality of our communication. And all of life is about relationships. So there is intrinsic value in good quality communication. And civility really deals a lot with the quality of our relationships. If we want them to be smooth and harmonious, we want to get along in business and community, in the workplace and in faith communities, then we need to have good communication. And so many times, the absence of good communication is tied in with a lack of understanding, because we don't understand and we haven't been taught that skill set of how to communicate. You're quite right. We are separated and we haven't learned to interact, between the sexes. So I think you raise a very, very valid point, and we need to go back to, the importance of knowing how to have conversation. Again, coming back to that dinner table, how to address someone, how to open a conversation with someone, how to respond when you're asked a question. What school do you attend? I attend St. George's.
Right, a complete sentence.
A complete sentence.
Yes.
Just the basics. We really do need to go back to that.
Yeah. That also takes me to we talked about interaction among sexes. We don't understand that we think differently. And the same language doesn't mean the same thing to male and to females. And even though we are females interacting with each other, we have different modes of expressing. We have females who are more empathetic than others, and therefore we have androgynous types who have a male side to them, and we misunderstand. It's very confusing, I suppose, for a young person.
Indeed, and also the impact of culture. We can't overlook the cultural differences. As Caribbeans, we're here, we're thrown into, a new environment, new culture. Many of us are operating in environments where there are multiple cultures, and we need to understand the importance of language, as you just said. Something that means one thing to you may mean something different to another person. So there really is the importance of learning the basic essentials of good communication. And I think when we think about those foundational values and principles that we talked about, if we really apply those, respect, consideration, kindness, thoughtfulness, even when we don't know the specifics and the nuances, that culture plays in terms of how communication works, if we apply those principles, we can be more successful and we can have better quality relationships.
And we can work around the cultural differences that we don't understand.
Absolutely.
Because basic politeness works, I think, anywhere.
And this is something I stress with my students and my clients. I tell them, no matter where you are in the world, you know, these principles can guide you to have better quality experiences.
Yeah. The last point before we go to a break, in terms of abuse of women, we're finding a lot more woman-on-woman abuse. And I'd like to talk about those, especially two specific instances we've had in our area in recent time, and how you view that in terms of what the sources of that might be and how we can correct that. And we'll also talk about the work that you're doing with young people and trying to bring this new culture of civility back to the community. We'll be back with more with Yasmin Anderson talking about civility when we come back.
When America wants to know what's happening in the Caribbean diaspora, there is one clear choice.
Hello, welcome to CaribNation.
Both people inside and outside of
Very excited about today's program. Looking at you, I can tell that you have traveled the journey.
One television organization brings America close to the people, stories, and events that affects Caribbean life. Get close, get answers, get CaribNation.
Thanks for all the adventures we'll have. Thanks for all the ropes we'll jump, the books we'll read, and things we'll make. Thanks for all the notes we'll play, flowers we'll pick, baths we'll take, secrets we'll share, races we'll run, and smiles we'll give. Thanks for all the joy we'll bring, the laughs we'll share, and dreams we'll dream. Thanks.
To all those who give birth to, homes to, or just give thought to people adopted as infants.
Thanks.
Thanks for considering adoption.
You're watching CaribNation Television.
Welcome back to CaribNation. I'm Doris Dean, and we're talking about civility. My guest is Yasmin Anderson Smith, who is an advocate for civility and co-author of a book on civility, and also an image consultant. Yasmin, as we talked before, you did co-author the book about civility. But recently in our community here in the Washington metropolitan area, we've had at least 3 incidents that stand out in my mind. The most recent was 2 young high school kids. One got stabbed over a fight that had been going on. It traveled from 3 different schools in the area. And 2 others were, one in Howard University, where 2 female students again got into a fight. One got killed. And the same thing happened at Bowie State University. We had 2 women who were roommates. Somebody didn't like what someone else done. One of them was upset because somebody played music too loudly. And she gets killed. The thing is that the person who tried to avoid the fight ends up being killed. Why? What is it that is happening on our campuses? Why is it that women at that age are still so angry?
Well, Darius, it's unfortunate that these incidences occurred. Of course, we're all saddened, by the loss of life, and this is the extreme in incivility when there is a fatality. Yeah. But of course, it begins way at the other end with very small incidents of incivility, stepping on someone's toe, or maybe making a comment that someone doesn't like. And these are not measured, but we hear all the statistics about, the more dramatic incidences of civility.
True.
But incivility really goes back to
Builds up.
It builds up, and you're quite right about these things among girls moving across grades, across schools, and building up. It seems to be a pattern with girls where they retain this anger, and it gets layered and built upon until there is an explosion. But earlier on, we talked about the principles, and we talked about respect. And respect is not just respect for others, but it's respect for self. And there was a time, certainly when you and I were growing up, that young girls, wouldn't think of doing some of the things that we hear young girls doing, in schools and on campuses now. So there definitely seems to be, a decline in that sense of, self-respect. And I would tie it also with image and identity and sense of self. We had a very strong sense of self that was grounded in family and faith community, and the community and among our elders. So we, you were Mrs. Reed's daughter, or you're Miss Johnson's daughter.
You
wouldn't
behaved
think
yourself,
of behaving in a certain way. But a lot of that, has declined. I think there's an abandoned self. There's this, the liberation and the sense of, I can do what I see on television, and I'm also not exactly even clear who I am. Am I Miss Little Kim, or am I Beyonce, or not even clear exactly who I am? So we have all of those issues being layered on top of the other. And again, there just seems to be that pattern where girls hold on,
to the anger.
They hold on to it, and then it explodes.
That then makes me wonder whether feminism has anything to do with it. I remember that in the 70s and 80s, we blamed feminism for everything that women did that was out of the ordinary. That seems to have faded a little bit, even though there's still some undercurrent there, and feminism, I think, has to be thanked in many cases for a number of the strides we have made among women. But I wonder whether feminism, or the concept of it, has led young people to believe that this is our generation to take over, and we're not going to stand for what our parents stood for, and therefore we'll tell people what we think, whether they like it or not. Do you think that is something that might have been engendered by the whole feminist movement over time, and that the young people coming up seeing their parents step out and take roles and go to work and things like that, whether they were absorbing a message there?
I wouldn't think that feminism is to blame, although there definitely is a general sense of rejecting, a rejection of some of the practices that our elders, displayed growing up. I think that women feel a certain sense of, empowerment and, wanting to express themselves in ways that, say, our parents didn't. But I wouldn't blame that as the cause for what we see in explosion of, incivility among young girls. I think it's really more that sense of decline in the values, that would give someone that sense of, self-respect and dignity. It's that empowerment that comes from seeing, on television, a total abandonment, and abandonment of these kinds of values that we see, in television shows and in, MTV and so forth. And
so it's a sort
kids
of an
imitate
empty
that.
empowerment.
Yes, exactly.
It's an
right.
empty empowerment.
It's stripped of the values that would give, you that sense of meaning and that sense of integrity and that sense of dignity.
So they don't have the base there. You have the show part of it,
it's
but
superficial.
not the rest.
It's superficial, and it's the reason why, in my own focus in my work with young people, that I tell them that image is not just appearance and dress, and wardrobe. It's really
how we project ourselves.
Yes, what comes from within, and civility is an important foundation for that.
Yeah. In the last few minutes we have, talk about the program that you have for young girls.
Yes, thank you for asking. The program is called Every Girl Can, and I started the program for girls in middle school, which here in the United States, it's girls between the ages of 10 and 14, to help them gain a stronger sense of self, to help them find their voices, and to embrace the personal development and life skills that revolve around image, identity, etiquette and civility, self-expression, and empowerment.
So your classes take the form of what? Lectures versus role playing?
It's fun and learning. So it's interactive. You know, it's hands-on. It's demonstration. It's field trips. You know, it's presentation. It's all of that rolled in. The idea is to help the girls learn these skills, but in a fun, learning way, so that they have a chance to really practice real-world, you know, examples of the things that they are learning. So they get hands-on. They hear from members of the community. You know, they do games. They do role play. All of this rolled into one.
Now, do they have an opportunity? Now, first of all, is it targeted to what we might say is underprivileged young people, or people who may not have access to some of these basic principles?
I certainly have served those populations, but the issues that face girls who would benefit from this program are really universal, and so
That's
all
true.
girls can benefit from it. But my program has certainly served girls in those populations who have been identified in schools or in community by their counselors. So, but it's not limited to those girls, because all girls, and which is why I named the program Every Girl Can.
Yes.
Every girl can benefit from embracing these important life skills in personal development, image, and identity.
Now, what kind of feedback have you had both from parents and from the girls themselves?
Oh my goodness, a wonderful feedback. You need only go to the website, everygirlcan.org, and see some of the feedback, relating it to real world situations. I remember one testimony that I got said, we need a program like this, because when I go into a Starbucks, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name of a company, I need to know that I can have a conversation with someone who's at the cashier. Our girls, you know, and young men too, need, you know, to have these skills. So, most definitely. And parents are just so excited that there is a program that gives them a chance to learn, you know, about some of the table manners and the etiquette, you know, that they are not teaching.
Some of those parents themselves
the parents, yes,
have
and
not
even some
learned.
and yes, indeed, and even some of the parents would like to take the classes themselves, because they feel that either there was some place where there was a gap. You know, they missed out on having that, so they're really excited about their girls having an opportunity to learn these all-important life skills.
Right. Now, your classes are held in schools, or people come to you? Or?
Oh, anywhere where someone will, you know, invite me to present the program. I have offered it in schools, community, churches, Boys and Girls Club, community centers, private, any place. There's no restriction.
Yeah. And is it nonprofit, or is it that they pay, the schools pay?
It depends. Sometimes the school pays, sometimes the individuals are
see.
paying, so it depends.
Okay. Well, we just have a few minutes, so I'll ask you to hold up your book and let us know where we can find it. I think it's at Amazon.com.
The book is The Power of Civility, and it's published by Thrive Publishing in California, USA, and it is available on Amazon.com. You may also visit my website, www.kymsimage.com.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and we hope we have some progress with civility in our community.
Thank you for having me, Darius.
My pleasure. Thank you for watching CaribNation. Until next time, I'm Darius Dean.